My daughter-in-law mocked my cooking. Even dogs wouldn't eat this. I quietly left the house, but when her boss said something shocking, everyone panicked. That very night, I had 108 missed calls on my phone. You know, sometimes pain doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people you let inside your home. That night, I learned it the hard way. It was Sunday dinner at my son Daniel's house in Boston. I had cooked my mother's old chicken casserole recipe. Slow-baked, tender, the way Daniel always loved it when he was a boy. I placed the dish on the table with a smile, hoping to see the same spark in his eyes. But before he could even lift the serving spoon, my daughter-in-law Olivia wrinkled her nose and laughed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Are you serious?" she scoffed, waving her fork like it was some kind of weapon. "This looks disgusting. I wouldn't feed this to the dogs." Everyone froze. The air grew sharp like shattered glass. I looked at Daniel, my son, the boy I raised, the boy who once begged me to make this very meal on his birthdays. But he didn't say a word, not even a whisper. He just stared at his plate, avoiding my eyes. I felt my throat close. My heart dropped into silence. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply stood up, gathered my purse, and walked out of their house, without a single word. On the drive home, Boston streets blurred under the rain. I could still hear Olivia's laughter echoing in my ears. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel, not because of the insult itself, but because my own son didn't stop her. By the time I got home, my small apartment felt colder than ever. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I sat there in the dark, staring at the casserole dish I had packed just in case. The meal that was supposed to bring us together had now ripped me apart. But here's the thing about silence: sometimes it's not weakness. Sometimes silence is just the storm holding back, waiting for the right moment. And that moment came sooner than I ever expected. The very next evening, as I sat on my couch, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. Just 3 words. "Mom, call me." I ignored it. Then another. "Please. Urgent." Still I stayed quiet. And then the calls started, one after another. My phone lit up like a siren. 15, 28, 54 missed calls. By the time midnight struck, the number read 108 missed calls. I didn't pick up. Not yet. Because something inside me told me Olivia's cruel laughter had just collided with a truth she never expected. And it all started with what her boss said at work that very morning. When the phone finally stopped buzzing, I sat there in the silence of my apartment, staring at the dark screen. 108 missed calls. From my son. From the same boy who sat still while his wife humiliated me. And I knew something had gone terribly wrong. The next morning, curiosity got the better of me. I didn't call Daniel back, but I did something else, something I never thought I'd do. I called one of my old friends, Janet, who worked in the same downtown firm as Olivia. "Janet," I whispered, trying to sound casual, "did something happen yesterday at the office? With Olivia?" There was a pause on the other end, followed by a low chuckle. "Oh, you don't know?" Janet said, her voice thick with gossip. Her boss ripped her apart in front of everyone. I froze. "What do you mean?" Janet didn't hold back. "He asked her to prepare a presentation for a client dinner. She laughed and said she didn't have time because her husband's mother was making some old-fashioned casserole. She said, 'Don't worry, she cooks like a peasant. I'll bring some leftovers to the office and prove it.' My chest tightened. My breath caught. She dragged me into her office gossip? She mocked me in front of strangers?" Janet went on. "But here's the best part." Her boss turned around, looked her dead in the eye, and said, "That recipe? That dish? My grandmother served it at her restaurant for 30 years. It's famous in Boston. People still line up for it. If you think you're better than that, maybe you're not the right fit for this company." I dropped the phone. It clattered against the kitchen counter. So that's what it was. That's why the calls. That's why the panic. Olivia's arrogance had finally caught up with her. And not just in front of Daniel's family dinner table, but in front of her colleagues, her boss, her entire professional circle. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel humiliated. I felt calm, because karma, it seemed, had spoken louder than I ever could. That evening, the calls started again. Daniel this time left a voicemail. "Mom, please. Just answer. Olivia's in trouble at work. She told her boss something stupid about your cooking, and now it's a disaster. He's furious. He suspended her. They're talking about firing her. Mom, please, we need your help. I listened to his voice crack. I could picture him pacing his fancy condo, Olivia crying in the background. But instead of rushing to them like I always did, I sat still. For years I had been their doormat, babysitting at a moment's notice, lending money they never returned, keeping quiet when they disrespected me. And now suddenly I was supposed to save her career? No, not this time. Let her feel the sting of her own words. Let Daniel sit with the weight of his silence. Because that night at dinner, it wasn't just Olivia who broke me. It was my son too. 3 days passed. 3 days of unanswered calls, ignored messages, and silence on my end. But on the 4th day, I opened my door to find Daniel standing there. His eyes were sunken, his shirt wrinkled. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Mom, he whispered, voice shaking. Please. Olivia's boss asked if you would come to the office. He wants to meet you. He wants to talk about the recipe. It's the only chance we have. I stared at him, my heart torn between anger and the love only a mother can carry. For years I had given him everything. My time, my sacrifices, my silence. Now, I finally had power, and I had to decide what to do with it. I walked into Olivia's office building in downtown Boston, my heart pounding in a rhythm I hadn't felt in years. The lobby was quiet, the fluorescent lights cold and personal, but I didn't feel small. I felt in control. A secretary led me to a sleek conference room, and there he was, Mr. Whitman, her boss, sitting behind a polished oak desk. He looked like the kind of man who didn't scare easily, but when he smiled at me, there was a flicker of genuine respect in his eyes. Emily, he said, using my name like he knew it mattered. Thank you for coming. I understand Olivia made some remarks about your cooking. I swallowed. My throat was dry, but instead of shrinking, I stood taller. Yes, I said. She did. He leaned back, fingers steepled. And she told me it was unfit for human consumption. His voice was calm, but his eyes sparkled with restrained amusement. Do you know what she doesn't realize? I shook my head. This recipe. It's a piece of history. My grandmother served it at her restaurant in Boston for decades. It's famous. People still come from all over for it. And Olivia, she insulted it. She insulted you. I blinked. That weight I'd carried for years, the humiliation, the betrayal, the countless times I felt invisible, suddenly began to lift. Now, he continued, I want to give her a choice. She can either apologize sincerely and take responsibility, or she leaves this company. Permanently. I looked at him. I looked at the power in his eyes. And then I realized I didn't have to say a word. I didn't have to beg or explain, because my silence had become my weapon. Later that evening, I received a text from Daniel. Mom, you were amazing. She's terrified. She actually cried in the office. I didn't know you had it in you. I smiled, but it wasn't just about Olivia. It was about Daniel too. About making him understand that respect isn't given. It's earned. And sometimes the people closest to you take it for granted until it's too late. That night, as I sat alone in my apartment, I reflected on everything. The countless times I had bent over backward for my son and his wife, the silent dinners, the hidden tears. And I realized I wasn't the same woman who left their house in humiliation that Sunday. No, I was stronger now. Stronger than their arrogance. Stronger than their disrespect. Stronger than the fear of being invisible. And I knew the real lesson wasn't just for Olivia. It was for Daniel too. Because seeing his wife tremble, realizing he had stood by silently while I was mocked, that pain, that embarrassment, it would change him. I hope. The next morning the phone buzzed again. A single call from Daniel. Hesitating, almost afraid. Mom, he said, voice quiet. Olivia, she wants to apologize. In front of me, she said she was wrong. That she didn't respect you. That she never will again. I paused. My heart was racing. A small part of me wanted to reject her, to let her feel the full weight of her actions. But another part, the part that had always loved my family even when they hurt me, that part softened. Tell her, I said slowly, deliberately, that respect is earned, and it starts with honesty and humility. If she can do that, then maybe, just maybe, we can move forward. Daniel exhaled a shaky breath. I will. I promise. That night I cooked again. My famous casserole, slowly, carefully, just like I had on Sunday. But this time I didn't bring it to anyone. I ate it alone, savoring each bite, letting the warmth fill me. Not because I needed validation. Not because anyone else would understand. But because I finally remembered my worth had never depended on their approval. For the first time in years I slept peacefully. No calls, no insults, no laughter at my expense. Just silence. And in that silence, power. I realized then that revenge doesn't always mean breaking someone. Sometimes revenge is quiet. Sometimes it's patience. Sometimes it's letting the universe or karma do its work while you watch and rise above. And I had risen. I also knew this wasn't the end. Olivia's arrogance wouldn't just vanish overnight. Daniel would need to understand what it truly meant to stand by those he loved. And I was ready, because the next chapter wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming respect, reclaiming dignity, and teaching the people I loved the cost of underestimating me. I never imagined that a simple dinner could turn into a war zone. But here I was, years of quiet endurance finally exploding into a force even Olivia couldn't ignore. A week later, Daniel invited me to their apartment. He said he wanted to clear the air. I wasn't sure if I should go. Part of me wanted to stay distant, to let the lessons linger. But another part, the mother in me, knew this was a chance to finally set boundaries. When I arrived, Olivia was sitting on the couch, her hands trembling. Her usual arrogance was gone, replaced with something I'd never seen before, fear. "Mom," she began, her voice shaky. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I should never have laughed at your cooking. I didn't understand. I let her words hang in the air. For the first time I realized just how much power she had given me, simply by underestimating me. You should have understood, I said quietly. That respect isn't optional. And that includes me. It includes your husband. It includes anyone you hope to keep in your life. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, clearly torn between his wife and his mother. But I didn't flinch. I didn't waver. Because the truth was simple. Respect is earned, and their silence on Sunday had taught them that lesson. Olivia nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. I understand now. I really do. And I want to make it right. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I smiled. Not a forgiving smile, not yet. A knowing smile. The kind that said, I see you. I see everything. And if you're willing, maybe we can start over. After that meeting, things started to shift. Daniel began to see what I had endured for years. The quiet, the patience, the invisible labor that had kept our family together while he and Olivia thrived. He apologized, not in words that were easy or convenient, but in actions. He started taking responsibility, defending me, and acknowledging the small sacrifices I'd made for them. Olivia's behavior changed too. She began approaching me with humility rather than disdain. She asked for my guidance, and surprisingly, I found myself mentoring her. Not out of obligation, but out of quiet satisfaction. I wanted her to understand that kindness and respect carried more power than arrogance ever could. But here's the twist no one expected. While Olivia and Daniel learned, the universe had one final lesson for them. 2 weeks later, Daniel's company announced a surprise client dinner. Olivia was tasked with leading the presentation, something she had previously believed was beneath her. She panicked. She called me in tears. Mom, I can't do this. I'll ruin everything. I didn't rush to rescue her this time. I waited, letting her sit with that fear, that anxiety, that vulnerability she had never experienced before. And then slowly I guided her, not by doing it for her, but by helping her see her own strength. Olivia, I said, voice firm but gentle, you can't run from the consequences of your actions. You have to face them head on. That's how you grow. That's how you earn respect. That night, as she stood in front of the clients, trembling but composed, I watched from the back. She stumbled once or twice, yes, but she corrected herself. She spoke with confidence that surprised even her. By the end, the clients were applauding, impressed. And for the first time, Olivia didn't hide behind arrogance. She had grown. And in that moment I realized something profound. Revenge isn't always about humiliation or punishment. Sometimes it's about giving people the space to see themselves and letting them rise or fall on their own. Later, when Daniel thanked me quietly, I didn't feel the urge to hug him or forgive him outright. I only said, "Learn this lesson, Daniel. Never underestimate the quiet ones. The ones who endure. The ones who wait. Respect them, or someday, life will teach you the same way I just taught Olivia." And he understood. Truly. That night, back in my apartment, I looked out over Boston's skyline. The city lights shimmered like stars. And for the first time in a long time I felt free. Free from being invisible, free from being taken for granted, free from the constant, subtle betrayals that had once defined my life. Because I had reclaimed my dignity. I had reclaimed my power. And I had done it without losing my humanity. Yet, even with Olivia humbled and Daniel changed, I knew there was one final step. One final twist that would cement this lesson forever. A lesson not just for them, but for anyone who ever thought they could underestimate me. It had been nearly a month since that disastrous Sunday dinner. Since Olivia's arrogance had collided with reality. Since Daniel had finally begun to see me, not as the quiet mother-in-law, not as the one who always complied, but as a woman with boundaries, a woman with strength. And yet, even with all that change, I knew the real test was still ahead. That Saturday, Daniel and Olivia invited me to their home again. But this time it was different. The air didn't hold tension, at least not at first glance. They were nervous, yes, but respectful. The kind of respect that comes when someone realizes the depth of their mistakes. As I stepped inside, Olivia approached me. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her eyes were steady. "Mom, I wanted to do something. To really show you that I understand." I tilted my head. "And what's that?" She led me into the kitchen. The same kitchen where she had laughed at my cooking only weeks before. She handed me a dish, carefully wrapped, steaming slightly. My heart tightened. "I tried your recipe," she said softly. "Exactly the way you taught it. And I want you to taste it first. Not to criticize, not to judge, but because I want to honor what I never did before." For a moment I didn't speak. The air was thick with emotion. Slowly I took the plate and tasted it. The flavors were perfect, the same as I had always made it. Tender chicken, savory sauce, love in every bite. And in that moment I realized something I had felt for a long time but hadn't allowed myself to admit. This wasn't just about food. It was about respect, about acknowledgement, about the power of patience and silence. Olivia's tears fell freely. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "For everything. For the laughter. For the disrespect. I hope someday I can make it right." I reached out, touched her hand gently. "It's not about making it right for me," I said quietly. "It's about making it right for yourself. About learning to see the people around you. And Daniel," I turned to my son, "and you, Daniel, remember that your silence can hurt as much as words. Stand up for the people who love you." Daniel nodded, eyes glistening. I could see the understanding in him, the real understanding, not just the polite kind. Later that evening, as I walked home through the quiet Boston streets, the city lights reflected in the puddles from the afternoon rain, I felt lighter than I had in years. No bitterness, no resentment, only a quiet satisfaction. For years I had endured the sneers, the dismissals, the invisible labor of a mother whose love was taken for granted. And now finally they had seen me. Truly. Not because I shouted, not because I forced them, but because I waited. Because I remained true to myself. Because I understood that real power isn't in humiliation. It's in patience, dignity, and the courage to let others face the consequences of their own actions. And here's the final twist, the ultimate lesson. Daniel and Olivia, humbled and changed, invited me to cook for their company's next client dinner. They wanted me to lead. Not because they had to, but because they finally understood the respect I deserved. I accepted. Standing in that kitchen, teaching, guiding, and creating with my own hands once again, I realized that revenge isn't about making people suffer. It's about reclaiming your own life, your own confidence, and your own voice. That night, as the clients applauded, and Olivia looked on, learning yet again, I smiled quietly to myself. I didn't need applause. I didn't need validation. I had earned my dignity. I had taught my lesson. And I had healed. Boston's skyline glimmered outside the window, and I felt a deep, unshakable peace. For the first time, I understood fully. Power, respect, and love, all of it begins at home within yourself. And no one will ever make me feel invisible again.